So picture this. You're taking your usual Tuesday morning commute, right? You're holding your coffee, looking out the window, and your tram slows down to open its doors at a station that you know for an absolute fact was demolished in 2027.
Yeah, or, I mean, imagine walking into your apartment building, you glance at the concierge's logbook, and it clearly lists a tenant from 1847, and they're somehow still receiving mail today.
It's a very specific, unsettling kind of wrongness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because we aren't talking about, a monster hiding in the closet. The horror here is the civic infrastructure itself just completely glitching out.
Which is the exact flavor of today's deep dive. We are exploring two very, very unique tabletop role-playing games. They were developed by an indie design collective called the Gray Ledger Society.
Right, and published in collaboration with CGCG Helix.
Yeah, and if you aren't familiar with them, they specialize in these highly atmospheric, weird fiction narrative games.
Which are just fantastic.
Truly. So the first one is called Les Arrondissements, which is set in this shifting, uncanny version of Paris. And the second is Linjalla, On the Line, which takes place in a highly regimented Nordic transit system.
And, while these are tabletop games, complete with character sheets and rule books and dice, we are going to look past the basic mechanics today.
Right, because there's a bigger theme here.
Exactly. The core focus across both of these source materials is this shared obsession with one profound concept, which is systems that remember, and what that memory does to the inhabitants living inside them.
I mean, the way these games turn municipal infrastructure into the main protagonist is just incredible to me.
It's so clever.
It really is. So to understand how these cities affect the people living in them, we first need to understand the mechanics of how and what these systems actually remember. Let's look at Paris first and let's
Yeah.
The source material talks a lot about the physical environment absorbing human history, but how does that actually work in the context of the game's world?
So the underlying logic in Les Arrondissements is that the physical infrastructure of Paris, so we're talking the ancient sewers, the centuries-old mortar between the cobblestones, the miles of old telegraph cables, it literally absorbs human routines.
It's like a sponge.
Basically, yeah. The locals in the game call this la mémoire vive, or living memory. Sometimes it's just referred to as the substrate.
The substrate, yeah.
The city essentially records behavioral patterns the way a stone staircase slowly wears down from foot traffic. It happens over decades, completely without intention.
So it's not a supernatural haunting. It's not a spirit with unfinished business. The building itself has just been doing the same thing for so long that it memorized the action.
Precisely. And because it records these patterns, the substrate ends up sustaining what the game calls les persistants.
The Persistants.
Right, which are these behavioral imprints. There's a perfect example from the source text, Madame Courcelle.
Oh, I loved this part.
It's so good. She was a concierge who died 8 years ago, but she kept her logbook with such intense daily devotion that her pattern just keeps running.
Wow.
Yeah, the building's mortar and wood absorbed her routine. So she's still sitting at her desk, greeting people and logging deliveries.
And I love that she interacts with both the living tenants and the historical layers of the building. The text mentions she might politely log a delivery for a phantom tenant named Desrosiers.
Right.
And technically, Desrosiers is a clerk from the 1800s, but his apartment door still feels warm to the touch because the building's memory of him is so overwhelmingly strong.
The environment is just playing back a deeply ingrained groove. And, we see a parallel logic in Linjalla, but applied through the rigid lens of a Nordic transit system.
Right, which is way more operational.
Exactly. The system doesn't remember individuals as much as it remembers operational data. It remembers outdated tram schedules, which the game calls Aikajime, or time residue.
Time residue.
Yeah, or it remembers routes that used to cut through buildings that have long since been torn down. The game refers to that as a linjapoikiyama, a line deviation.
It's like you look out the tram window, and for 90 seconds, your commute takes you right through a neighborhood that was completely redeveloped a decade ago.
Yes.
You can see the lights on in the old apartments. And the fascinating part is how the transit authority handles this. They explicitly do not classify these events as hauntings.
No, not at all.
They are strictly categorized as maintenance issues. The schedule updated, but the physical city didn't get the memo.
Yeah.
It really feels like a stuck macro in a massive Civic Excel spreadsheet. Or you need to clear the browser cache, but for an entire metropolis.
The spreadsheet analogy is incredibly apt.
Yeah.
These cities aren't malicious, right? They aren't trying to drive the player characters mad. They are just blindly accommodating.
You're just doing their job.
Exactly. They run these patterns without a source because, like any massive infrastructure, these systems prioritize continuous operation over objective reality. The tram must run. The mail must be logged.
Right.
The system fundamentally doesn't care if the passenger stepping onto the tram is from 2044 or 1974, as long as they have a ticket.
Which raises a huge logistical question. If the city is constantly glitching out these historical memories, how do the living actually go about their day?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Like, how do you commute through a ghost station without losing your mind? I was reading through the rule books, and the game's answer is that most people just don't notice.
That's right.
But I need you to break down how that actually functions in the gameplay, because there are specific stats tied to this, right?
Yes, and this is where the game's brilliant mechanical design comes in.
Hmm.
Both games measure your relationship to the city's reality. In Linjalla, this stat is called synchronization, or sync.
Okay, sync.
It operates on a scale from 0 to 10. If you have a sync of 10, that is total alignment. The transit system works perfectly for you. Your tram is always on time.
But there's a trade-off.
A huge one. The trade-off is that you are utterly, completely blind to any anomalies.
You literally cannot see the demolished building outside the tram window. Your brain just edits it out.
Your brain edits it out because you are perfectly in tune with the system's preferred version of reality.
Wow.
But if you start investigating things, your sync drops. If it drops all the way to 0, you become what the game calls a ghost schedule.
A ghost schedule.
Yeah. You become a pattern without a source. The city completely forgets you exist. You can't buy a ticket. The doors won't open for you, and everyday people look right through you. You've fallen completely off the operational map.
That is terrifying. And Les Arrondissements has a parallel mechanic, right? Called Coherence.
Yes, starting at 5.
Okay, so at Coherence 5, you are a highly legible citizen. The city recognizes you, doors open smoothly, your mail arrives on time. But as you start investigating these weird little civic anomalies, your coherence drops. You start seeing the seams of the world.
Yeah.
The text notes that by the time you hit Coherence 1, a persistent from 1920 might pull out a chair at a cafe and chat with you about the weather. But the living barista who has served you coffee every morning for 5 years, they suddenly can't quite remember your name or place who you are.
It's so tragic. You are vibrating at a historical frequency that ordinary present-day society can no longer tune into.
Wait, hold on. This is where I have to push back a little, just from a traditional gaming perspective.
Okay, sure.
I noticed the source texts mention a climactic mind roll. In almost every role-playing game I've ever played, mind or intelligence is the stat you use to solve a puzzle.
Right, usually.
You roll your dice, and if you score high, you piece together the clue, and the game master gives you a reward. You advance the plot. But in Les Arrondissements, if you succeed on that climactic mind roll to see the truth behind a glitch, the game penalizes you by dropping your coherence. Why on earth would the game penalize a player for successfully solving the mystery?
I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it subverts standard game logic to make a profound thematic point.
Okay, how so?
Think about the real-world alienation of seeing a systemic truth that society refuses to acknowledge. Understanding the system means noticing its seams.
Right.
But the more illegible the system becomes to you, the more you see it as a flawed, glitching construct rather than a solid reality, the more illegible you become to the system.
Oh, wow.
You can't be a smoothly functioning gear in a machine once you realize the machine is broken.
Okay.
The penalty for seeing the truth is isolation.
So the game is actively punishing you for looking behind the curtain.
Exactly.
If seeing the truth literally costs you your place in society, how do the people living in these cities survive? They must have to develop coping mechanisms to negotiate with a faulty reality.
They absolutely do.
I noticed the source material kept referencing a deviation report for the transit workers in Linjalla. How does that actually play out at the table?
Well, the deviation report is one of the most brutal mechanics in the game, and it all comes down to a single checkbox.
A checkbox.
Yeah. Imagine you're playing a transit worker. You see a tram stop from 2027 materialize out of thin air. The rules require you to file a deviation report.
Okay.
At the bottom of this physical form that the player actually fills out at the table, there's a checkbox that says, I confirm this deviation was observable by standard monitoring equipment.
But standard equipment can't see the anomalies. The cameras and sensors only record the system's preferred reality.
Exactly. So checking that box is a lie. As a player, you have a choice. Do you check the box, effectively lying to the system and telling it what it wants to hear?
If you do.
If you do, the system rewards you. Your sync goes up. You remain a good, legible employee.
But what if you don't?
If you leave it unchecked, which is the objective truth, your sync drops. The system flags you as a problem.
Yeah.
It forces the player into an agonizing moral compromise over a literal square on a piece of paper.
That is incredibly stressful. You're trading your own sanity for job security.
Basically, yeah.
And in Paris, we see this negotiation play out across entire factions of society. The source material outlines a group called the Bureau de la Quiétude Municipale, the Municipal Quietude Office.
Oh, the quietude?
They operate like the most surreal HR department ever conceived.
They really do. They cope with the crumbling of reality through extreme bureaucracy.
Right.
If a historical imprint of a clerk from a century ago manifests at a desk at a city building and starts processing old forms, the Quietude Office does not call an exorcist.
What do they do?
They just issue the ghost a temporary work permit and schedule a performance review for 6 months later.
Oh my God.
They completely prioritize bureaucratic functionality over objective reality.
We don't care if you've been dead for 40 years, Guillaume. Just make sure you use the blue ink.
Exactly.
It's hilarious, but it's also a deeply sad commentary on how institutions function. And then, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, the game introduces a faction called Les Refus, the Refusers.
Right.
These are people who see what the city's memory is doing and completely reject it.
Yes. The refusers are desperately trying to maintain their personal autonomy against a system that wants to overwrite them. The source material notes that they seal the windows and doors of their apartments to block out the substrate.
How does that actually work mechanically? Like, how do you seal out a memory?
Well, remember that the memory is housed in the physical infrastructure.
Oh, right. The mortar and the wires.
Exactly. So the refusers go to extreme lengths to physically isolate their homes from the civic grid. They rip out the historic mortar. They cut the old telegraph wires running through the walls. They paint over centuries of historic wallpaper with heavy, non-conductive materials.
Wow.
They are essentially creating an infrastructural dead zone in their living rooms so the city's memory can't seep in.
But the cost of that is intense isolation.
Complete isolation.
They can't walk the paths the city dictates. They can't rely on city services. They end up incredibly eccentric and completely cut off from civic life. They keep their personal truth, but they lose their community.
Yeah, it's a harsh trade-off.
So if the system punishes you for noticing, and humans have to either lie like the transit workers or isolate themselves like the refusers, is there anyone in this setting who can just see the truth without being destroyed by it?
There is, but they aren't human. Let's look at the Linjalla and Linjalla, the line dogs.
Oh, the line dog.
This is perhaps one of the most poignant details across all the sources. The line dogs are actual physical dogs that ride the trams, unticketed. The transit drivers all know them and let them sleep under the seats.
And the rulebook states that mechanically their sync is permanently locked between 3 and 8. Meaning they are always in the aware range, they always see the anomalies, they know exactly what's wrong with the city.
Yes.
But they are dogs. They completely lack the ability to file a deviation report or speak to anyone about what they see.
It's heartbreaking. If we connect all these different factions back to the broader human condition, every group represents a different compromise between autonomy and belonging.
That makes a lot of sense.
The Quietude Office sacrifices truth for stability.
Yep.
The refusers sacrifice belonging for autonomy. The line dogs have perfect perception, but zero agency.
Wow.
Both games are positing a very uncomfortable idea. Maintaining a functional civic life requires a level of willful, bureaucratic blindness.
You literally have to close your eyes a little bit to be a good citizen.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the final phase of a game session. Let's say you've spent the evening trying to fix a glitch, you've compromised with Ghost, you've filed your deviation reports.
Right.
What happens when the dust settles and the adventure is over? I was reading about the re-entry phase, and it seems like the system always gets the last word.
It really does. The re-entry beat in Les Arrondissements is where the philosophical weight of the game really drops onto the players.
Tell me about it.
After a scenario concludes, after your group has successfully dealt with whatever temporal disturbance was happening, the city's substrate updates its own memory of the event, and it always alters the narrative.
It aggressively simplifies everything to fit its operational model, right?
Always.
If you just went through this harrowing near-death ordeal to stop a spatial loop from swallowing your apartment building, the city will officially record the event in the municipal archives as routine infrastructure maintenance.
Exactly.
Or it will rewrite your personal agency entirely. It will remember that you only solved the problem because a municipal clerk asked you to, completely erasing the fact that you took the initiative on your own.
The city smooths out the edges of reality to make the event fit its preferred mundane model. And here's where the game design twists the knife.
Oh, here we go.
To heal your character, to recover the coherence points you lost during the investigation, you, the player, must actively accept this revised version of events.
Let's just put you in the shoes of a player for a second to really understand how wild this is.
Yeah, imagine it.
Imagine you are playing this game with your friends. You just spent 3 hours of real-world time stressed out, rolling dice, unraveling this terrifying mystery about a phantom train from 1980.
Sweating over the character sheet.
Exactly. You finally solve it. The game master looks at you and says, "The city has recorded this as a minor electrical failure. Do you agree?"
It asks you to be complicit in your own erasure. The system isn't your enemy, it's your home.
Right.
The only way to get back to normal, the only way to make sure the barista remembers your coffee order tomorrow morning and your key still fits your front door, is compliance.
You trade your hard-won personal truth for the comfort of being legible to society again. It's like your whole life history is being aggressively autocorrected by a very polite librarian. You just nod and say, yes, it was just routine maintenance, while knowing full well you just spoke to a ghost from 1847.
And this incredible tension is physically represented at the table by an item called the insight token.
Oh, the insight token.
Yeah. In Les Arrondissements, there is only one physical insight token for the entire group of players. It represents a rare, fleeting moment of absolute clarity where a character sees the substrate, the system, for exactly what it is.
But the rules say that holding it is a lonely burden.
It is the loneliest burden in the game. Because true insight in these cities cannot be shared. If you hold the token, your character is the only one who sees the truth in that moment.
So what do you do?
The only way to find solidarity, the only way to not be alone with that terrifying knowledge, is to give the token away, to literally hand your clarity across the table to another player so their character can bear witness too.
But they can't both have it.
No. The system can only tolerate so much truth at once. Only one person can hold the token.
It's a brilliant way to force players to physically pass the burden of truth around the table.
It's masterful.
So bringing this all together, we have these two incredibly atmospheric RPGs. One is built around a surreal, shifting Parisian logbook, and the other is built around a freezing, perfectly timed Nordic tram schedule.
Yeah.
But beneath the dice rolls and the character sheets, they are using the uncanny to explore the very real tension between the individual and the infrastructure we live inside.
Absolutely.
The systems are going to keep running, and they will always prefer their version of reality over yours.
They are masterful explorations of systems that remember. They ask us to consider the heavy toll that systemic memory extracts from the everyday inhabitants who just want to live their lives, get to work on time, and have their mail delivered.
It really leaves you with something to chew on, especially when you step away from the gaming table and back into the real world.
Oh, for sure.
Because we already live inside vast systems that remember us. We live inside algorithms, social media feeds, corporate databases.
Very true.
These are systems that build persistent, sometimes wildly outdated, and often deeply flawed models of who we are.
They track what we click, what we buy, where we go. They build a digital substrate.
Yeah.
They construct a profile of our lives that prioritizes operational data over our actual complex human reality.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, how much of your own coherence do you sacrifice every single day just to fit smoothly into the algorithm's memory of you?
That's a scary thought.
How often do you just check the box on the deviation report to keep things moving?
All the time, probably.
And what might happen if you decided to stop checking the box and actually look at the seams? Imagine you're on your commute tomorrow morning. The tram stops. The doors open. Do you look out the window to see what year it is?